All right. So this is Enchanting Escapes. Yes, go Rachel. This is Enchanting Escapes Romantasy Readers Advisory for Libraries. This has been highly requested in the last year, and I'm so excited that I have a fantastic co-host to lead this webinar with me. So Rachel will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Corey. I am the branch manager at the Irwin Public Library, which is a branch of the Harnett County Public Library System. I have been a librarian in one capacity or another for the last 10 or so years, and I've been at Irwin for the last year and a half or so. I have loved starting the Romantasy book club, which we started. I think that we haven't done it for a super long time, but it's been very successful, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it. I always like to share what I'm currently reading and currently listening to because I'm a very big audiobook person. I'm currently reading The BFG by Roald Dahl for our Bernie's Junior Book Club. And I'm listening to The Women by Kristen Hanna for another book club that I go to through Harnett County Public Libraries called Books and Brews. So between running book clubs and attending book clubs, a lot of my reading is book club related, but a goal of mine is definitely to start doing a little bit more pleasure reading. Although, of course, what I read for the book clubs is always for pleasure as well. But and then we'll go from Devin.
Yeah, I'm Devin Wall, the instruction librarian for NC Live. I'm currently reading Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher, which is the first in its series. Really enjoying it so far. I feel like as far as fantasy goes, it's really funny. I love the humor of it. I'm so glad that there are people sharing in the chat that they like it as well. A friend recommended it to me because I had like a couple of things that I was like, well, I really want something where the romantic counterparts are adults, they're not teenagers. Like, I don't want anything that's too much of like an 800-pound doorstopper, 800-pound, 800-page doorstopper. So I went with this one. I'm over halfway through, really enjoying it so far. But in terms of doorstoppers, I started listening to Outlander by Diana Gabaldon through Hoopla. And I'm really enjoying that. I needed something to kind of lock into as a 30-hour audiobook for commuting and walking my dog and doing all sorts of stuff. So I've been really enjoying that as well. One thing that I've picked up in terms of readers advisory is I'm a huge fan of the Reading Glasses podcast. If you've never listened to it, highly recommend checking it out. One thing they talk about is doorways, like what are your entry points? How do you kind of pick certain titles? And a huge thing for me is setting and language. I love a mystery with a strong sense of place. I love supernatural elements, but I also feel like language and the writing style of a particular author really draws me in. And so I've added in kind of my wheelhouse of books that I really gravitate towards. I love mysteries or anything that has a mystery element. The mystery element of Paladin's Grace really brought me in as a huge plot point. So I love when there's a mystery with ambiguous endings or multiple perspectives. And I read any music memoir or biography. I'm a huge fan of that for nonfiction. Um, but we'll get into our agenda now. So we're going to start off with the background of Romantasy because it is a genre blend that invites a lot of questions as you kind of try to break it down and understand that it is so much more than just a marketing term. We'll go through some key titles, especially for certain themes. Rachel will share more about the Harnett County Public Library's Romantasy Book Club and some of the titles that they've selected. I'll do a demo of novelists and ways to find romantasy titles. And then we'll share some tips at the end for marketing romantasy and ways to talk to readers about this genre and do some readers advisory interviews. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So getting into background and key titles. So with romantasy, it's one of those genres where the interiority of the genre can be a little confusing for a fantasy reader, but for a romance reader, it's not. It's very much a genre that I think if you already know that you like romance, it can be an easy transition into romantasy. If you're a fantasy reader with romantasy, some of that interiority and internal conflict can be confusing because you're like, well, no, everything that's happening should be about court intrigue, external stakes, dragons, all those sorts of magical elements that might bring people to a genre. Um, but, unlike epic fantasy, where the danger is often an external, like avenging a crown or saving a kingdom, romantasy often asks the questions of what if doing the right thing still feels wrong? What if who you are isn't enough? A lot of the tension comes from these personal and emotional stakes, from internal conflicts, and from relationships that matter deeply to the characters. Um, it is still has a lot of those high stakes elements of fantasy, but the romance is that driving force of the plot, which is where romance readers are going to find their niche and what they like about this genre blend. Romantasy also isn't tied to a specific era or formula. It blends a lot of fantasy aesthetics, so gowns, balls, castles, magical creatures, witches, even werewolves, vampires can kind of be brought into romantasy. Um, and books like the A Court of Thorns and Roses series exemplify this blend where the worlds feel intimate yet immersive. There's an element of escapism that we'll touch on with this genre, but it's perfect for readers that are looking for the emotional depth of a love story, escapism with a immersive fantasy world, and wonder with the magic or magical creatures that are in the story and the world that's being built. Um, and Rachel, if you have anything to add here, you're good. All right. So just some common elements of the genre that we picked apart as we were planning this webinar. We talked through, well, these aren't necessarily themes, but these are elements that come up quite a bit in this genre. The first one being dual point of view storytelling. So often authors will structure their books so that alternating chapters are written from the point of view of the romantic counterparts, or it might be that their internal thoughts are being shared on the page. So there's a lot more of that interiority, not only of the female lead, but also the male lead, or for queer storytelling, the whoever the romantic counterpart is. Um, there is a huge interest in the common theme of enemies to lovers as well as forbidden romance. I feel like those are some big entry points, and diehard fans of this genre often gravitate towards those elements. You can find a lot of romantasy that doesn't have an enemies to lovers romance or a forbidden romance. But those are some things to look out for in asking a patron, or also selecting certain titles for book club or displays or things like that is something that is part of this genre that people gravitate towards. Another thing is the magic, because it's involved with the interiorities of characters. Sometimes characters will lose their magic or gain magic or certain powers. Um, and magic is often this metaphor for emotion or identity or really understanding oneself. Um, there's a lot of reinterpretation of classical myth and mythologies across the world. So there's been a huge development of romantasy that has incorporated um, mythology from Asian mythologies, from Middle Eastern mythologies into the storytelling. It's not just Celtic mythology, but there's also a lot of international um, expansion of this genre in a really interesting way.
Right, exactly. And another thing with that as well is classic fairy tales as well, such
Yeah.
as A Court of Thorns and Roses having some people saying that it is a reinterpretation of Beauty and the Beast. So that can also really drive in some new readers as well. Another thing, another trope that is very common in the romantasy genre is the slow burn connection, which I feel like also kind of goes with the enemies to lovers, because obviously it takes a while for them to go from enemy to lover, which obviously makes it more of a slow burn. There's a lot of themes of destiny and choice, being, the one person who can save the world or save the country or just kind of that kind of thing. Something that they were born to do, that there was a prophecy maybe. some kind of a destiny. I believe in Quicksilver, there's a talk of like a prophecy that was foretold with her meeting Quicksilver, which the sequel to that just came out today, guys. Brimstone, dying to read it. There's also strong, complex protagonists, and that's something that a lot of readers really love as well because it's great to read books with strong female protagonists. Again, to go on to Court of Thorns and Roses, one of the biggest complaint is of Feyre and her not being as strong as as female protagonists typically are in romantasy. But it's always great to see a woman just being able to kick butt and do her thing and all of that. And then, of course, we also have court intrigue or political tension that happens in a lot, whether it's cozy romantasy, which we'll be discussing later, or the more kind of general romantasy. There's usually some kind of political tension or just being able to do the right thing in really difficult situations. And then finally, another really common element is that found family, where the female protagonist somehow ends up being feeling alone in the world, whether it's because, you know, she was separated from family and friends, or she was the only survivor. And then she ends up kind of like with this ragtag group of friends that ends up being her found family and help her um, fulfill her destiny in that.
All right, so we want to turn this question of romantasy recommendations towards you all and ask, what are some romantasy titles and authors that you like? Yes, it is your time to shine. Please share in the chat. And if you are new to the genre, that is totally fine. And you want to just kind of observe what people are sharing in the chat, that's all good. But Jesse sharing Saint of Steel is actually your favorite series of all time. Jennifer Armentrout, Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. I just finished that one as well. Sarah Beth Durst, Wooing the Witch Queen. Sue Lynn Tan's books. Yeah, Patricia Briggs. Rachel Grillig, Rebecca Ross, awesome. And for folks who are new to the genre, and yeah, I feel like Travis Baldree definitely counts because there is like a light romance in Legends and Lattes. Freya Marsk, yeah, these are great. Twilight. It's funny, as we were planning the webinar, Rachel and I were talking about, is the surge of interest in romance in the last few years a byproduct of teenage interest in Twilight and Harry Potter, or is it a return to that? I feel like that can't, it's there. It has to be some factor in why there's such an interest in romantasy now.
Oh, absolutely. And even the Hunger Games, which
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
have necessarily that fantasy aspect, but still, I feel like that could be a gateway as well.
Hmm. Nice. I'm so glad folks are sharing favorite authors
I know so
and
many extra things to,
series.
and Divergent. Yes, thank you so much. That was another
Yeah.
one that we had discussed in our
Hmm.
planning was the Divergent series. That was a really good gateway, especially since all three of those have in common the fact that they had the movie adaptations, which of course
Yes.
always helps.
And then we have one more question is what romantasy titles and authors do your patrons like? Um, so feel free to share in the chat any any titles you've noticed, series being particularly popular, Fourth Wing, definitely
Oh,
Rebecca
absolutely.
Ross,
Quicksilver and
Quicksilver,
Rebecca. Yep,
Sarah J.
definitely.
Maas.
Yes,
Yep.
ACOTAR. We can never keep it in. We always say that we will not shelf if we ever get an ACOTAR book back or
Yeah.
Fourth Wing. We don't shelve it until we're literally turning the lights off because a hold will come for it.
Oh my gosh. Cruel Prince series. Yeah.
I think Delirium could fit. I haven't read it in a really long time, so I don't remember all the little details, but I feel like Delirium could fit.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. We haven't included any manga titles or manhwa titles in this webinar, but that is a good um,
That is, yeah,
edition.
that is a really great addition. Heather
Yeah.
Fawcett is really popular, and I'm
Hmm.
still waiting for my copy of Alchemized to get here. So we haven't had any checkouts, but our patrons have been talking about it lots. So I know as soon as it gets here, it's going.
Yeah. Allie
Yes, Allie
Hazelwood
A's.
shift. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Mate just coming out and Bride. And that's something that we'll bring up as well as vampire, werewolf, all of that is under the broad umbrella of romantasy. Even though Anne Rice was publishing for years, even though Twilight's been out for a long time, I think that now that we have this catch-all genre,
Mhm.
it's important to kind of think through how those titles fit in as well,
Right.
because now we have a way to kind of describe them under this broad banner.
Right.
Um,
And as Carol pointed out, Charlene Harris as well with the True Blood series. And I kind
yes.
of forgot about that until her name was mentioned, that was definitely kind of like with the Anne Rice, where it's been around forever, but there just
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily like a name for it.
Yeah. Um, So we have a couple of gateway series here as entry points into the genre because we wanted to, yeah, and hope that's a really good point that what is old is now being rediscovered by many new readers and fans of the
Yes.
genre. Absolutely.
Which makes
Um,
me so happy. I love
mhm.
that.
Yeah. We wanted to distill kind of what are some core series that are key for romantasy and understanding this genre. So the first one on the far left is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Very much a steamy, high stakes fantasy built on forbidden romance and explosive twists. Um, the Crowns of Neaxia series by Carissa Broadbent is has a lot of morally gray characters and slow burn tension. That's where some of these elements kind of come up across various series. The Hades and Persephone series, so reinterpretation of classical myth by Scarlett St. Clair, A Touch of Darkness being the first one. This is also on the more steamy side, is a retelling centered on gods, bargains, and love in the underworld. The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon is an enemies to lovers epic anchored in political intrigue and electric chemistry. And then Akatar, as we are all familiar with, is very much seen as a quintessential romantic series with a blend of fairy lore, adventure, and intense romance arcs. And then Fourth Wing, Rebecca Yarros broke publishing records earlier this year with the latest installment in the Empyrean series, Onyx Storm. Basically, in the 20-year history of tracking fiction bestsellers from the New York Times, this was the fastest selling release was earlier this year. So there's just been a huge interest in the genre from publishing, from readers. But the Empyrean series is, as we all know, a Dragon Riders Academy story fueled with danger, rivalry, and a sizzling romance. Um, and then we pulled together some standalone titles, um, realizing that it's actually harder to find a lot of standalone picks in romantasy because, like high fantasy, often the world building and stories are kind of laid out in the foundation of the first book, but so much of the arcs of characters develops over a couple of stories in this series. Uprooted by Naomi Novik, I really like as an example of a standalone pick because when I was getting really into Breath of the Wild, the Legend of Zelda video game a couple years ago, I was looking up, okay, what are books that remind me of this game and wanting something that is immersive and feels like the world of that video game. And I got recommended this book, and it is a really interesting dark fairy tale retelling that is a slow burn romance. And so this is one that I kind of think of. Sword Heart, the second installment, is actually coming next year, so it won't be a standalone title anymore. But I do love T. Kingfisher, and I really think this is a cozy comedic fantasy romance, and it has a nice blend of adventure, but also I think the banter in her stories is really well done. But it features a magical sword warrior and the woman who accidentally summons him. And Rachel picked out two titles as well for this.
Yes, and just from looking at the comments, just really quick before I dive into Addie LaRue, I'm seeing that somebody had mentioned Adrienne Young has having a few standalones, which yes, she does, and some of her stuff can definitely, absolutely be romantasy. And then somebody just mentioned The Princess Bride,
Yes.
considered romantasy, absolutely. So it's just so fun to see that, you know, now that there's a name for it, looking back and be like, wow, we've actually been reading romantasy forever. So it's just it's really great, and I love being able to like share these ideas with everybody. But for the standalone picks that I had chosen, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is probably my was probably my first foray into romantasy, especially like I said, now that we have a name for it. That was the first book that I saw absolutely blow up online. I'm very big into book talk, which is where I hear, you know, heard about Akatar for the first time, Fourth Wing, all of that stuff. And The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue was probably one of the first ones that I saw starting to have things like the sprayed edges and multiple editions where people would start collecting different copies of the same book, which now as we see like with Fourth Wing and other things, there's so many alternate editions and different covers and sprayed edges and all that stuff. So Addie LaRue was kind of the first instance that I saw that. And then the second standalone title that I chose was The Night Circus. I got my inspiration for this one from my sister. I have not actually read this one just yet. It has been on my TBR forever. But I thought that I would include that because when I started talking about the Night Circus and romantasy and stuff, the Night Circus was one of the first things that my sister had mentioned. So I wanted to give her a shout out in a way by including the Night Circus.
And we wanted to highlight a couple of key trends that we've noticed in this genre that are good for thinking through from a reader's advisory perspective. The first one being the obvious, which is social media driven discovery, TikTok, Instagram, as being a way to generate viral buzz for titles. Rebecca Yarros is somebody who had been publishing for years in the romance genre. And then once Fourth Wing came out, it just took off. It was just like lightning in a bottle. And
Yes.
so that's something to think of, as well as there might be people who have been writing genre fiction for a long time, and then this is their first romantasy book, and it's generating buzz and a huge surge of interest. There's also in this genre, I feel like, an not disproportionate, but there's a huge amount of debut titles and authors. So keeping up with debut titles is really key, because I think those end up just through social media and the way that readers are learning about different series and authors. A title can just kind of take off really quickly. Um, Hybridized settings and stakes. So I think through the influence of, yeah, and there's a lot of indie and self-published being picked up by the big five publishers. Yeah, that's a really good
Yes.
addition. Hope in the chat. That's something that, some Legends and Lattes starting out as self-published and then really taking off as well. So that's something that it's not just an author starting off with the big five, but indie self-publishing space, even people who've written fan fiction for a long time becoming romantasy authors, like Freya Marsk is an example of that. There's, yeah, keeping an eye on the fan fiction, the indie self-publishing space, I think is really important for this genre. There's also something that Rachel and I talked about where a lot of romantasy readers use Kindle Unlimited and can find
Yes.
certain titles and series that way. We didn't include any of those titles in our selections today, but we can list some series in the handout for this webinar, some of those series that are popular. That's something that kind of presents a challenge collection-wise for libraries, but
Yes.
that's something to keep up with any romantasy programming, book clubs that you're doing in your library, is keeping up with some of those indie authors and figuring out if the library can purchase some of those titles. Um,
We've
The
even
hybridization,
had,
yeah.
I'm sorry. We've even had patrons go as far as donating copies of these indie authors so that way we can add them to our collection. So that way they can be a little bit more well known or used for a book club. So that's really great too. So it's always nice to have patrons who are just as in it as you are and just and really want, these titles and these authors to kind of get their time in the sun.
There's also the rise of cozy romantasy, which we'll get into. There's a huge blending now of contemporary settings with magical realms, thinking your practical magic sort of environment. And so we'll get into more detail with that. Payback's a Witch is one that came up when I was thinking about this, but that's something where even though we have the world building of epic fantasy and worlds that are very grand and unlike our own, there's also a lane for more contemporary settings. And that might be an entry point for people who don't like a lot of big speculative world building and they want something that feels a little bit more like our world. Um, the other thing that we've seen a lot is broader representation in the genre, and this was something that was requested in registration. Sulin Tan, daughter of the moon goddess. So there's a lot of diverse world building and culturally grounded mythology and magic that have broadened the readership of this genre. There are way more series, as I mentioned, incorporating Asian mythology, Middle Eastern mythology, Latin American mythology. Um, and it's not just the Celtic mythology that we've long seen in the fantasy world. So pulling out examples of this in your displays and recommended reads list is really great. I would also recommend recognizing the genre's breadth in different displays, pulling out certain themes or elements, doing a display related to romantasy in contemporary settings, because that might be an entry point for some readers. And others might be like, where are the dragons? Give me the dragons. And you can do displays related to other elements of this broad genre. But I really think inviting your readers to think through what counts as romantasy is a great way to engage with them. And then cozy romantasy, the stakes are lower, but I do think this is a really good bridge for fans of historical romance. I was listening to an author describe it, Freya Marsk, as it's like Jane Austen, but you add in magic. And so there's a lot of internal conflict or related, the Secret Service of tea and treason is an example of, like, let's take a setting that feels like Regency England and then add in some magic to it. Here are a couple of different examples. I think as a question came up, Legends and Lattes, is it romantasy? I think it is because there is a romance subplot. Um, the romance is definitely on the lighter side. The house on the Cerulean Sea, I also think counts because there is a romance in it. That is a core part of it.
And I feel like we'll
And
kind of touch on that a little bit as well, where
yeah,
romantasy doesn't necessarily have to have a ton of spice or a
yes,
ton of romance to count as romantasy. It's also
yeah.
still kind of, you know, the feelings and that kind of thing, that it doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of romantic scenes to be
Mhm.
considered romantasy.
Yeah, and it might be something where the romance might be side. These are good for patrons also that know that they might be gravitating towards more gentle reads. They like cozy mystery already, suggesting like the very secret society of irregular witches, which I love Sangu Mandana's books. This is a good one because there's not a lot of romance to it, but it is part of the story. But it's definitely it's all about the feels, the vibes. The vibes are very cozy in romantasy now, and I think
Yes.
highlighting some of these titles in addition to some of the staples can be a great way to draw readers in.
Exactly. And
Um,
and the spell shop, for instance, checks off so many of those elements that we talked about in one of the first slides, like the found family, the political unrest,
yep.
and those kinds of things. And so and cozy romantasy, because sometimes you're just in the mood for something a little bit cozier.
Yeah. And with Legends and Lattes, just to bring it back to it one more time, it really broke open the cozy, low stakes fantasy space. Like it was a self-published book that really proved a
Yes.
market, and then it was picked up by the mainstream, obviously written by an audiobook narrator who has read hundreds of other books. So he kind of had a feel for what he wanted to write, but hugely popular. So I think that there is like a spectrum of offerings that can bring in some new readers to this
Oh,
genre.
absolutely. And the Emily Wilde trilogy has also absolutely
Yes.
blown up.
Yeah, this is good when, in registration, people ask for more subdued romances, things that are a little bit on the milder side. I would say start with cozy romantasy and kind of figure out where in this broad genre you find um, your niche. It's very much a subgenre within this romantasy that focuses on found family, soft magic, contemporary settings, small stakes, but it also can be um, you know, uh, more like historical romance where it's set in a Regency inspired setting, like The Secret Service of Tea and Treason, or Freya Marsh books, which are in sort of like an Edwardian setting. So it has those kind of ties to historical romance and length too. Yeah, I'm glad Lauren
Yes,
brought
thank
up in
you,
the
Lauren. Yes, that's
chat.
absolutely because it
Yeah.
can be very intimidating to pick up some of these books. Like Devin and I were talking about, they're like absolute bricks. And
Hmm.
for people who are just trying to get back to reading, or they don't think that they have enough time for reading, it
Yeah.
is a lot easier. It's a little easier to swallow when the book is only 350 pages or so. um and uh and also it's also the good thing with cozy romantasy is it's more relatable in the sense that the protagonists tend to be of a more adult age, like late 20s,
Yes.
early 30s, that kind of thing. So you don't necessarily, if you want something with a light amount of romance, it doesn't necessarily have to be a teenage protagonist or an early 20s protagonist, where some of us more seasoned ladies can relate to their age.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Veda sharing in the chat, I need a cozy romantasy after a stress-inducing epic romantasy series. A nice
Yes,
palate
yeah, you need a
cleanser.
palate cleanser sometimes after reading Fourth Wing and all the stuff that goes on with that. And sometimes you're like, "Whew, I want to keep the fantasy, I want to keep the romance, but maybe let's tone it down a notch."
Yep. All right.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about my specific book club, so that way I can give you guys some tips or just kind of whatever it is that y'all are looking for. So this year, since I have started the Romantasy Book Club, first of all, I was kind of given the Romantasy Book Club from another branch. Somebody, her name is Danielle. She had started the Romantasy Book Club at the Coates Library, the Coates branch of the Harnett County Public Library. And when she left to go to a different library system, I picked it up because there was such an intense need in the community. I had several book club members come to me and say, this is exactly what we were looking for, and please, please, please help save it and don't let it go. So it really shows the power of the romantasy genre and how much the community and the people really, really want that. So some of the picks, especially some of our earlier picks, you can tell that we were still trying to figure out together what exactly it means to be romantasy. It turns out like Butcher and Blackbird and Hooked are probably more like dark romance and Gothicana, but we're still trying to figure out together what it actually means to be in the romantasy genre. And that's one of the great things about this book club is that people don't really care. They're just like, you know what? We all are interested in the same thing, even if it doesn't necessarily technically abide by all the romantasy rules. It's still, we're having a great time together. We have people of all ages come here. We have, like, and the younger 20s all the way up to women in their 70s, and everybody absolutely loves it. It's a very unserious type of group where we just have fun and we explore what the romantasy genre means. So, as I mentioned earlier, the sequel to Quicksilver just came out today, and I'm super stoked. I cannot wait to read that. It was a great audiobook. Butcher and Blackbird and Hooked. again, are still, we were trying to kind of play with the parameters of Romantasy. We were just kind of going by popular titles just to kind of get us started. The Games Gods Play goes on the mythical factor that we were talking about earlier. Gothicana kind of Bridge is its kind of dark romance, and then we're also trying out some more YA titles because we do have some readers who and some book club members who aren't super big on the spice level. And that's another really great thing about having a book club is that they can be like, for instance, when they do their recommendations, I have them circle how many chili peppers they think it is if it's something that they've already read. Because for the members who aren't quite as interested in the spice level, it's that, it gives them, oh, okay, well, maybe I want to sit this month out because this one might be a little bit too spicy for me. Or on the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, people are like, oh, well, I don't really want to do a YA. I don't really want a younger, teenagey kind of protagonist. So I'm going to sit this one out. So our last two have been Throne of Glass. And then at the beginning of December, we're going to be reading The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. And then next year, we're going to kind of dive more into a little bit more YA, a little bit more technically correct romantasy. But there really are no bounds. It's all patron based. I let the patrons pick and recommend titles to me, and we just have a lot of fun with it. So, some of my tips for starting a Romantasy book club is just kind of starting with your general book club. If you have one that's just kind of general fiction, maybe select a Romantasy title and see how it goes over. I had somebody pick A Court of Thorns and Roses at the very beginning of this last year, and we had some members who absolutely loved it and wanted more. We had other members who were like, okay, let's kind of stay out of the fantasy realm kind of thing, and that kind of thing. And for those that it does garner interest from, ask them if they would be interested in an all romantasy book club. Again, the patrons came to me about starting the Romantasy book club, which is great. So some of you may also have that situation as well. But for those of you who you are wanting to start it kind of fresh and you're not really sure where your patrons lie with that, if the Romantasy title does garner interest, ask them if they want to be involved. Watch what your patrons are checking out and mention starting a Romantasy book club. So obviously, not everybody who goes to your general book club is going to be who is going to be interested in your Romantasy book club. There may be people who only come in once every so often, or things like that, or you notice like what they're putting on hold and you start checking stuff out. Like I had this one like woman come in, and I noticed that she was checking out Quicksilver, and I noticed that she was checking out books that were coming up on our Romantasy list for our book club. And I said, hey, we happen to be doing a Romantasy book club. You are reading a lot of the titles that we're interested in reading. This is when it meets. Here's a bookmark about more information. And then she started coming as well. And then another really great feedback that I have gotten is letting the readers pick the books. They're going to have a lot of fun because they're going to get to see titles that either they've read or have been on their TBRs forever. And now that it's a book club pick, it automatically kind of moves those books up on your TBR, which is a lot of fun for me as well. Like the Throne of Glass was on my TBR forever. And then it came up as a book club pick. And I was like, oh, finally, I can have an excuse to put down all my other books to read this book. And then also, as I had mentioned, make a recommendation form that includes spice level. So you can let your members know, if they're really interested in heavy spice, okay, this will be a title that you may be more interested in, or the opposite end of the spectrum, that it gives them a chance to be like, okay, I'm going to sit this one out. I would really prefer more YA type titles. I also asked some of my patrons for feedback. I thought that I'm always wanting to hear some feedback and get an idea of what my patrons are thinking, so that way I can better serve them, better, make the best book club. So some feedback that I've gotten into is that this is a great book club, and that they look forward to it every month. We had somebody who she moved for army purposes, and she's saying that this book club made the abrupt army move better, and it's how she got to meet like-minded people. Um, we also have just, we always have so much fun and we have great conversations. And then we have somebody who also gave a little bit of a longer statement that I can let y'all read. But a lot of the feedback was just that they really appreciated that it was so patron focused, that they got to pick the books, that it was a community that is very non judgmental, that we could laugh and we can talk about non serious things. We always go on different tangents about different things. You always know when it is Romantasy book club night around here because you can always hear laughing from the meeting room, and it's really just a great time, and it's a wonderful mix of individuals who come.
All right, well, we're going to switch gears a little bit and go into using Novelist Plus. So this is a reader's advisory database that all of the NC Live member libraries have access to. For folks who are joining us from out of state, your library might have access to this database. We provide it to all of our member libraries, but it is a fantastic one-stop shop for reader's advisory. In terms of Romantasy, they just added Romantasy as a genre term that you can search for in the platform, and I'll show you what that looks like. But all titles and novelists are organized by genre, so a lot of the Romantasy titles are categorized as Romantasy, which is great now, but they also, some of them are categorized as other fantasy subgenres, so I want to point that out and show you what that looks like in the platform. They're also organized by their theme. So if you have patrons that know they like enemies to lovers, marriage of convenience, some of those elements, those common themes in romance and romantasy, they can search for those themes themselves in the platform and find recommendations. It's also nice to have appeal factors beyond genre to help people kind of explore their taste and maybe get recommended romantasy, even though they may not think of themselves as being romance or romantasy readers. And then looking at subjects and time and place, you can explore contemporary settings in this genre or also find historical settings as well. And so in terms of searching for romantasy in novelists, what I did is I put GN, so the field code for genre, and then romantasy in the search bar. And I like to check the box for award winners to see if anything's being recommended by library reads or it's been recognized for a fantasy award. We'll get into a couple of award winners in this as well, but one that came out last year that is on my TBR for winter break is The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Wong. This is a fantastic romantasy. It's a debut title from this author that covers two queer men who um, there's a time traveling element, so it's set in the Ming Dynasty. They also show up in more contemporary China and then in Los Angeles in a contemporary setting. So it's a really cool time travel romantasy that blends Chinese mythology and history and historical romance. And this is just a nice way to put in the genre and explore and find new titles and go beyond your typical picks. Um, I include The Road of Bones, which is the first in this series debut title from Demi Winters. What I did in Novelist is I put in that genre search and then I checked the box for award winners and this came up. So it's a nice way to kind of see and explore some titles. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of shout out a couple of these. But one thing to note about searching is looking at different subgenres that are relevant. Some titles might be categorized as urban fantasy. So Den of Liars is a YA romantasy that is categorized as urban fantasy because it has a setting that is a city setting. Contemporary fantasy, so The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches is categorized as such because it is in contemporary UK. There's also paranormal romance. I'm glad that people in the chat shared monster romances as being an emerging part of this genre, and even potentially being its own book club. But you can search for paranormal romance and find titles that are also can count as romantasy that way. Searching by themes and novelists. So an example of a title from this year that had a ton of buzz is The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy, Enemies to Lovers, which Rachel pointed out as we were talking about this last week. This is inspired by Hermione fan fiction. So
Yes.
it's a great example of how fan fiction often kind of finds its way into the genre and shapes it. Um, and I think this is one too that letting your patrons know that they could access novelists and search for these themes and find titles that way is a great way to increase usage of the platform and personal exploration.
Yes, and Alex, I agree. I'm also trying to restrain myself from putting every single one of these books on hold. Creating this with the Devin, I was like, okay, I need to add this, add this, add this. So I'm right there with.
Yes. Um, and it's nice because these are good shortcuts for finding titles quickly. You don't have to do endless rabbit holes of Google searching or Reddit threads. Even, obviously a lot of places like Book Riot have like titles of, hot authors and romantasy or recommended reads. But the nice thing about Novelist is it's all in one place. It's not kicking you off to a different site. And often, if you have your library catalog linked, it's a great way to encourage your patrons to use this platform even more because then they can see what's available in the library. Academies of Magic being a popular one as well for both adult and YA romantasy. And then epic heroines, as we mentioned, strong female characters are a core part of the genre. And so you can use that theme to find characters um, that appeal to you. And then searching by appeal factors. So some titles might not be categorized as romantasy, but they have magic as one of their appeal terms. And you can also use these appeal factors to explore titles that you know you're interested in. Like if character arcs and well-developed characters are really in your wheelhouse and what you're drawn towards when you're looking for titles, then you can search for that appeal term by putting the field code AP, well-developed characters, and finding as an example In the Veins of Drowning by Callie Cassidy, which I think came out earlier this year. Yeah, and we have some good recommendations in the chat. I'm so glad. This is also another way to find YA romantasy. So use the age range filter in Novelist so you can see what has been categorized as being for a teen audience. You can also see when you click on the item level, if it's being recommended for younger readers, it's showing the grade level and reading level of it. So that tells you that it's not one for adults or new adults, but it is for a younger audience. Here are two that I've picked out: The Encanto's Daughter by Melissa de la Cruz, who is a longtime adult romantasy author who's now writing a lot of YA. And then Illusions of Fire is another one that has received a little bit of buzz as well by Nisha Sharma. So this is one way that you can find titles based on age range. One question that came up is like heat level for YA. In novelists, they're going to be categorized by different romance appeal terms, really following the same romance appeal terms as for adult titles. But you can also use the tool Romance IO, and those give you a lot more descriptions about the content of these books, and you can cross-check and see how it's categorized and get an idea of what is appropriate for a certain age range and the content of it. I also am I've linked to a really good YA romantasy starter list from the Austin Public Library because they have like 30 different titles in here that I think are a really good starting point because that is a collection question that came up in registration. Yeah. Yeah, I just think romance.io is a good complement if you're using Novelist to also cross-check in there for content. A couple of different examples. So I know the Cruel Prince was mentioned by Holly Black. Lauren Roberts is also a huge YA romantasy author. I included the Divine Rivals duology by Rebecca Ross because content-wise, it's on the milder side, and so that would be a good entry point for YA. And then Stephanie Garber's books being developed from fairy tale mythology. So that is also another entry point, as well as the Otherwhere Post, I think is a good pick as well. Um, Yes, and somebody asked in the chat about sharing this presentation. Yes, we will share the slides. We also have a handout with even more titles and recommendations in there. I want to jump into recommendations for tweens. So this one was a tough question that came in early on in registration, and I'm glad somebody asked it. I wouldn't necessarily, if you're looking for recommendations for tweens, there are a lot of authors that have been writing these titles and they're not categorized as romantasy. I would not recommend YA romantasy for an 11-year-old. There are so many other great chapter books and bridges to that point. So if anybody is familiar with Patricia Reed, that is a throwback for me because I loved reading Patricia Reed when I was younger in the 90s. Classic fantasy, strong female character where a princess refuses tradition and befriends dragons instead. I also feel like Juliette Marillier was mentioned in the chat earlier. I feel like that is a good recommendation for tweens. And of course, Ella Enchanted as being a good one, just such a beloved retelling. But there are others here that I've kind of shared as examples. Marissa Meyer is a big sort of YA tween romantasy author who would be a good pick. Um, and then a couple of others here, like The Poison King is really more fantasy for middle grades, but I do think there's like a very light romance element to it. And it's a very much a fairy tale adventure. So I would say skewing more towards the side of starting with some of these picks and finding read-alikes is good. I also included
The
Tamora Pierce as well.
I apologize. And I just wanted,
No, you're good.
and I believe Cinder is also made into a graphic novel version or something like that.
Yes.
I believe that's what that particular cover is. So also for those that want to start, because I know that graphic novels, of course, are a great bridge into reading longer chapter books and different things.
Yeah.
So having Cinder as a graphic novel version could be very helpful as well for those tweens.
hmm And I'm glad people shared other examples. And also a lot of romantasy authors have written YA or more middle grades, like T. Kingfisher has the Hamster Princess series. Um, and Hope sharing in the chat, a lot of these are older when teen books and characters were, yeah, older titles. Yep. Howl's Moving Castle definitely, I think, could be a good tween recommendation as well.
Yes, I agree.
hmm Yep. Um, and
Yes,
then
the
here are a
School of
couple
Good and
of,
Evil, yes, has been a definitely a hit recently. And I was
mhm.
thinking that as well. That's also a good one for tweens as well. Thank you, Becca.
um, One thing that's great about using Novelist is you can find forthcoming releases. So you can see what has been released this year, but also some that are on the horizon. Obviously, a lot of the publishing industry, a lot of books come out October through December because of the holiday season. But this is a great way to look for titles that are coming out January, February, and keeping up for 2026 as well. But with 2025 releases, um, these are good ones to keep on your radar because they might be ones that patrons are requesting for purchase from the library in the next year and buzz is generating. Rachel, if you want to share a little about Shield of Sparrows as one that's on
Yeah,
your list.
absolutely. So Shield of Sparrows was a big one on my TBR. It is one of my upcoming patron requests for a future book club meeting. I'm super excited to read it. So it's been, even though it's been out for several months now, it's also garnering buzz again because the sequel was just announced. So I'm very excited to read that, and I can't wait for that one. And then, of course, I keep talking about Brimstone because I'm so excited. And apparently, book three has already been sort of talked about a little bit. So if you're big into the Quicksilver and Brimstone, definitely check that one out. Although, of course, pretty much everything on this, now that Brimstone was released today, is officially already released. But some of them, like Shield of Sparrows, have a sequel coming out. Wild Reverence is a standalone. I believe Alchemized is also a standalone, which again is much like a book that we just discussed earlier, is a take on the Hermione fanfic. And then the Violet Thistleweight is a more of like a cozy
Mhm.
So there's definitely a really good mix of things that have come out this year, and I think 2026 is going to be another really good one.
Yeah, Lauren sharing in the chat, at a bookstore that she worked at up until September, we sold out of Shield of Sparrows in less than 48 hours.
I
Wow.
am not
Yeah.
surprised. I am not
Hmm.
surprised. There has been so much buzz, and the sequel is already generating a ton more.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, I'm really excited to read it. So I'm trying to be a good girl and wait to read it for the first time with book club, but we will see if that happens.
A true test of patience.
Yes.
Before we get into the platform itself, I did want to share. I like to think through pop culture tie-ins with every genre that we cover in these webinars, and Practical Magic with the long-awaited sequel coming out next year. It's a huge influence for me. I love it. I feel like the vibes are fantastic. And so I wanted to share a couple of examples that remind me of pop culture tie-ins that are important. In the Shadow Garden is a Southern Gothic fantasy for fans of practical magic. Dungeons and Dragons, there's been just such an explosion of interest in tabletop gaming and Dungeons and Dragons in the library, in not only public libraries, but also in academic libraries. And so Tusk Love, this is a joke. It started out as a joke from the Critical Role D&D web series. The actors involved in it kind of made this joke of a steamy sort of backstory. And then the writer, Thea Guanzon, um, decided to step in as a fan of the web series, a longtime D&D web series, and write this book for real. And so this is a fantastic one. So now you can follow Guinevere, a sheltered noblewoman, and Oscar, a gruff half-orc, as they battle bandits, magic, and slow burn romance. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a recommendation for somebody who's new to the genre. It's an example of there are so many D&D inspired series in the Romantasy space. This is one that came up because of the popularity of the Critical Role D&D web series, but that's something to keep in mind with your readers, is finding recommendations that tie into the dynamics of tabletop gaming. Fantasy video games, I feel like Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age, Skyrim, like these are all things that can influence the vibes of Romantasy and maybe bring in readers if they have particular video games that they like and they want to read a series that reminds them of a video game. So The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hashem very much has the vibe of a Baldur's Gate. There's a lot of political intrigue and forbidden magic involved in it. And then, as we mentioned, House Moving Castle, Studio Ghibli, as another example of people love the cozy, lush vibes of those movies. And The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea is a YA romance by Axio. That would be a good fit as well. And so just a
And
couple.
and thank you to those in the chat who are mentioning K-pop Demon Hunters, because that has
Yes.
definitely been exploding. So I really appreciate those recommendations, and we'll definitely be looking into them.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to jump into the platform now and show you all a couple of things. Let me see here. So one thing that you can do to start off is by going GN Romantasy and then adding in different filters. Now, the platform has done a refresh over the summer, and so I like to add in award winner, and then you can always check the box for audience. Like if I just want to find teen, award winner, Romantasy, books, 9 come up. And I can see Fearless. I can also see The Marble Queen and some others here. One thing that you can do is click on a particular title and they have that categorization. So minimum, maximum grade level, Lexile score, to give you an idea that this is a YA title. And then the About This Book section, they have these clickable tags. So if you want to find more romantasy that is related to the fairy realm and is intricately plotted, you can then explore a list of 8 different titles and find some more here. I also really like, I highly recommend taking a look under the story elements index and finding titles this way. So one thing that you can do is go to genres and see under fantasy, romantasy will be listed, I believe. Yes. So fantasy is underneath, but you can click on it and find titles that way. One thing that you can do as well is use the theme index and search for recommendations. So if you want to find, let's go with, I'm going to scroll through to romance, and you'll see the difference here between the themes for adult titles and then themes for YA. So enemies to lovers for YA romance is categorized as hating to dating, and then friends to lovers as falling for a friend. So that's a way that it kind of splits off by age group. And you can find a couple others here. So one thing that you can do is, let's say I want to find a romantasy that's about marriage of convenience. I can add in the genre filter here. So I'm going to search romantasy, and now I have 13 titles, and I can explore this even more. So let's say I want to find, I'm going to click on this particular title. One thing that's great is you can always explore the read-alikes. I know that Wooing the Witch Queen came up as a title that some folks are fans of. You can then click on this read-alike, see the reason it's categorized as a read-alike for this book, and then view the details and explore from there. So a lot of searching can be done on here, exploring tastes, developing displays. You can log in with your Google account if you want to with MyEBSCO. There's compatibility with Gmail, and you can use your account to save lists for displays, particular titles for programming. But I'm just going to click on The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy because it's one that we mentioned earlier. And this is where you can take romantasy, and let's see what other darkly humorous romantasy books there are. I can click explore. And here are 3 other recommendations. One that's coming out this month, Hollow by Caroline Peckham. So that's where you can kind of explore a little bit more using the platform. One thing that they don't have, that they have for other genres, is they don't have a romantasy recommended reads list in the platform yet. So there's no starter list within the platform for this genre. But I also recommend going to the appeal index. There was a question about spice level. One thing that you can do in Novelist is use the heat index to find titles. These are for adult titles, for adult romantasy. And then you can also find other things related to style. So let's say if I wanted to find a romantasy that has a strong sense of place, I can add in the genre filter if I want to on the right-hand side, click apply, and then I can add further from there. If I just want to find forthcoming titles, I can see there are no recommendations based on that, but I have one book that is recommended for this particular appeal term of strong sense of place. It is Gate to Kagoshima by Poppy Kuroki, and I can find some more recommendations that way. So that's one way that you can kind of start off in the platform and explore a little bit more from there. Let's say I wanted to look at Asian romantasy that's maybe cinematic. I have 2 books that it's recommending, Shanghai Immortal being one as well. and then I can go back and use the appeal terms within a particular title and explore even further from there. There's also no genre guide for Romantasy yet, but you will see some Romantasy titles included in the fantasy genre guide as well as the romance genre guide. So I highly recommend getting a feel for the story elements index and using some of these and adding them as filters to your search to explore. Like, let's say you want to look at, let's pull in here. Let's say you want something that is going to be really fast paced. You're maybe a mystery reader as well who wants something that is going to be gripping and quick in this genre. You can add in these appeal terms and then add in the genre and explore further from there. Also adding an award winner and seeing if anything has been recognized. And I'm going to pull up Storm Song as an example. And I can scroll through and see that it was an award winner of Lone Star's Favorites. And then I can see a little bit more about CL Polk. One thing I recommend as well, especially for if you're trying to figure out the romantic content for YA readers or for new adults, is looking at these starred reviews. You can check the filter to make sure that there's a review available for a book, and you can read it on the platform and see, all right, based on this, is it going to be a good pick? Do I want to include it in a particular display that I'm developing or in a program? And then go from there. But I highly recommend kind of searching for known authors, using those read-alikes, and then playing around with the appeal themes and genre index to find titles that way as well. And eventually, maybe novelists will add in a recommended reads list for Romantasy and a genre guide, but you can also explore the curated lists here and see if there's some fantasy ones that come up. Let's see. Yeah, like if I pick Romantasy, it's not going to come up. But maybe if I pick fantasy, the recommended reads list. Yeah, so they're using, okay, they do have a Romantasy list, but it's categorized as fantasy. So I can see a couple for diverse fantasy fiction. And then here is the Romantasy list that they made last month. So that's one that could be a good starter. A couple of these titles we've included in the slides. And there's a couple that came out this year to explore. And then you could see other related lists down here. So paranormal romance, complete duologies, as well as a couple others. So that's one way that you can use the platform. I'm going to jump back into our slides. And we're going to share just a couple of tips for helping readers. And so Rachel's going to share some best practices.
Um, so some of the best practices that I came up with and I was looking at are starting with appeal factors and not just genre level labels. My apologies. So things like romance level, fantasy intensity, tone, pacing, that kind of thing. Like, do you want the romance or the fantasy to be more prominent? Do you like detailed world building or do you want something lighter? Using read alike and feel alike approaches. So, similar tropes or themes, but also vibes. Do you want more of a dangerous magical politics vibe? Do you want more of a slow burn vibe? You can focus on tropes. Tropes are super popular. Some people have some really strong feelings about which tropes they like and which ones they don't like. As we were talking about earlier, like enemies to lovers, found family, slow burn. Do you want kind of the magic school dragons? Do you want court politics? Grumpy sunshine is something that I hear a lot about for different books, and that's a different one. We've definitely had a lot of questions about clarifying heat level and age category and kind of how to have that conversation because they are, as somebody in the chat pointed out, uh, they can be kind of personal in ways of, adults asking for less spice without, wanting to sound a certain way, or somebody wanting to ask for a lot of spice without feeling that they're kind of being judged for how much spice they do or do not want. So you kind of ask them, okay, do you really want something that's like more adult? Do you want something that's more new adult or YA? How spicy is too spicy? Just mention it kind of neutrally. Let them talk about it. Um, Let them just kind of chat on it a little bit. Um, as we've done, I feel like really well with this particular presentation is offering a mix of both popular and lesser known titles. By offering popular titles, yes, they are wonderful for gateways and hearing about things for the first time. But as we know, the more popular and just kind of like things like Fourth Wing and A Court of Thorns and Roses, as we were talking about, they're also hard to get on the shelf because they're always on hold. So it's also really good to recommend lesser known options, things that may be on the shelf right then and there, or don't have, or like on Libby, where you put something on hold and it says just says several months wait. And obviously, you want something to read now. So by giving them a lesser known option, it's something that they can get in their hands now. Something that's also really good is Hope. Yes, where is Fourth Wing? On people's bedside tables. Absolutely. And the same thing for even Shield of Sparrows and different things, or not romantasy related at all, but Freedom McFadden. Like people are like, oh, I want to read this author. Well, so does everybody else. So let's give you some other options as well. You also really want to use non judgmental and reader centered language. And what that means is trying to avoid phrases like guilty pleasure, trashy, just romance, because you don't want to make readers feel bad for wanting to read what they want to read. If they want to read something that is trashy, like we don't want to call it that. We don't want to make them feel bad. Um, so you ask like things like, what kind of reading experience are you looking for? Or if they are checking something out, be like, oh, that's a great pick. What part of it appealed to you the most? You can also do something like mention representation and content appropriately. So that means asking them, are they looking for LGBTQIA plus relationships? Are they looking for maybe a disabled or neurodivergent characters? Do you feel comfortable with authors of color or cultural mythologies like Devin was talking earlier, Celtic, South Asian inspired and whatnot? Because some patrons may prioritize wanting to read diverse characters, and but we obviously don't want to assume anything. We want to provide multiple formats and show them how they can use library tools to access them, such as novelists, but also Libby. If they are like I'm almost completely reading or listening to audiobooks because that's just what I have time for. So my my branch doesn't have audiobooks and everything is digital anyway, so I wouldn't have audio CD. Sorry. I wouldn't have a need for an audio CD. So having it on Libby, I can just connect it to my car without necessarily having to use Audible, where the library is still getting some credit for that. Passive displays are great. You can make bookmarks, you can make displays, that kind of thing. One thing that I think is really interesting is kind of even preparing a script. Sorry, getting over a cold. You can provide kind of a script. So that way, other people who are at the desk who may be a little bit lesser known to the genre can still help patrons if you're not the one at the desk. And it can be things like confirming what kind of format to age range, identifying top appeal factors, and kind of offering like 3 to 4 kind of go-to titles that anybody can kind of recommend. Also keeping up with the trends, because even though those popular books are always on hold, you still want to have your finger on the pulse. You still want to make sure that your library or branch has a copy of it, and it will come in eventually, but at least you copy on it. Also mentioning series status, because some people want to read something that the series is complete. They don't want to have to worry about waiting for the next book. They don't want to have to worry about the series maybe not continuing if it's not popular enough. They want a series that is absolutely complete. Whereas other people, they don't necessarily care, or also in terms right, blame JJ, yeah, the Game of Thrones fiasco with him not completing that series. Absolutely. I love the sugar and spice display. That's genius. I love that. But by keeping up with trends, you can also say, oh, well, this book is going to have a sequel and it's about to come out. So it kind of gives them an idea. Okay, should I put this on hold now? Should I check it out now? Or should I wait another month, another 2 weeks until the next installment of the series comes out? And my biggest and best tip is just talk to them, just have a conversation. It's the only way that you're going to get to know what they like, what they don't like. If they think that your collection is doing a great job with representation, or if they think that you could do a little bit better. Feedback is the only and best way to get that kind of information. So just talk to them.
Yeah, and then I have a couple of questions to ask readers. I think it's good to ask if they've read romance before because I think that so much of romantasy draws from romance and includes fantasy, but romance really first. Because people have to get used to the interiority of these stories, figure out if they like that as part of their genre, and really kind of asking them like what kinds of books, authors, movies, or shows do they like. um, I was talking to my coworkers on the NC Live team before this webinar explaining Paladin's Grace, and so much of it reminds me of A Knight's Tale, the classic with Heath Ledger. So I feel like having those little pop culture examples can be a really nice way to ask them, okay, if you already know that you're a big fan of um, Harry Potter or you're a big fan of Bridgerton, like those can be nice entry points into this genre. You can find books, series, authors that have similar vibes to what you like in other aspects of pop culture. Asking people with level of romantic intensity, are they drawn to certain tropes? And then what is the tone? You can always find dark and intense in romantasy, but you can also find cozy and whimsical. So there's so much of the tone that I think impacts what people are interested in. And if they like more of the high fantasy, epic quests, kingdoms, or do they want something that's a little bit more of a contemporary setting that's low urban fantasy, contemporary world with a little bit of magic sprinkled in? Um, and then asking kind of, are there certain creatures that they're interested in? I love a witch book. I'll always read a witch book. I know that that's where I have found my lane in this genre. Um, or if people know that they really want to read more about fairies, they read the Encyclopedia of Fairies and they want to explore a little bit more. That's what they like about the fairy world of ACOTAR. Um, and this is a way to kind of combat the popularity of this genre and never being able to keep a copy of Fourth Wing or ACOTAR or some of the core series on the shelves, is finding these hidden gems to help kind of readers branch out and explore. A couple of different awards to take a look at. The first three are romance awards, but Goodreads Choice Awards added a romantasy category last year and this year. That is a good place to see titles that are getting interest. Um, and then I love the suggestion in the chat. Romance equals happy ending. There are amazing fantasy novels with a love story in them, but the ending can sometimes be open-ended or ambiguous or just downright sad.
Yes,
Yes.
I could not
Yeah,
agree more. Yes.
absolutely. So that's where it's drawing in from romance, having that happy ending, and a fantasy response to grimdark. Yep. I think that's a really good example in the chat. Folks, I'm in that follow-up email, I'm going to add the chat in because we've just had so many good comments in here about the
I was
genre.
going to suggest that, yes, because
Yeah,
we have an amazing chat. And George R.
yeah,
Martin with Game of Thrones. Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
very bleak, very political, in terms of the political intrigue of these
Oh,
books.
absolutely, yes.
So that's where Romantasy has really, yeah, definitely been a reaction
And
in the
as
other
you're about to talk
direction.
about Outlander as well, has
Yes,
been huge with
yes,
that as
yeah.
well.
So we have a core collection of audiobooks in Hoopla. I find that I have faster turnaround times in here than it with Libby, if sometimes I'm waiting months for a title. So I would recommend checking out Hoopla. We have the first in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. We have most of the Outlander series. I think there's maybe one or two books that aren't in there as audiobooks. The narrator for the Outlander series is fantastic. She's won awards. I really love her ability to do multiple voices. And then we also have a Holly Black title in Hoopla, The Darkest Part of the Forest. So just something to keep on your radar that there are multiple formats. With this genre, I feel like there's so many readers who are using Kindle, audiobook, and various formats to explore their own interests and tastes. So letting them know about um, ebooks and audiobooks is really key. I know we're a little bit over time. I would highly recommend for outreach inviting local and regional authors. Rebecca Yaros came to NC State and it was a massive event in January of this year.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing libraries kind of dipping their toes into doing more Romantasy programming. So New Hanover County Library did a Romantasy book discussion and craft last month at their Northeast branch. Burning Pages Bookstore is a Romantasy only bookstore in Wilmington. So tie in, invite your local bookstore, whether it's a romance bookstore or an independent bookstore, partner on events, especially with finding certain speakers. I know Rebecca Yaros, part of the reason that she came to NC State's campus was it was a partnership with Quail Ridge Books. But yeah, thinking through inviting, integrate Romantasy with other romance-focused programming coming up. In February, obviously, that's a big time of the year for romance programming in the library. And adding in some of these titles, I think, is a great way to inspire interest in the genre. I know we're over time. I will say before we leave, invite North Carolina authors. I'm sure these are four that are doing traditional publishing, but also self-publishing. Um, I'm sure would be happy to be a part of a panel or an author talk. T. Kingfisher is also based in Pittsburgh, so she is a North Carolina-based author as well. Um, One thing to keep in mind is a lot of authors are using their pen name. So T. Kingfisher is a pen name for Ursula Vernon. So sometimes writers might be writing in a particular genre and they have a pen name just for romantasy. So looking up author information and seeing if they've written in other genres and if they're using a pen name or not is a good way to keep track of authors in this space as well. Um, yeah, Holly Renee is North Carolina based. Yeah. So just adding in a couple of examples. We
I
have
do want to
time.
shout out
Yeah.
the comment about romantasy is a great response to women's empowerment and how traditional
Hmm.
fantasy includes a lot of violence against women. I want to,
Yes.
so I do apologize for interrupting, but I had to shout
No,
that
no.
one out. That is such a great comment and so true.
Yes. Yes. Well, and fantasy being often a very male-coded genre for so long, that having that female voice in there, romantasy is definitely a reaction to that history of the genre.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, in promoting novelists, we have a whole section of our website that we'll link to in the supporting handout for this webinar. If you are an NC Live member library, you can order glossy print materials from novelists through us for free. Huge posters, bookmarks. I highly recommend putting these in holds, in book bundles and displays. And then if you can, linking your catalog to novelists. I've included the support email if you want to get that started for your library. But this is a great way to encourage readers to use the platform at your system. Um, any questions? I know we're a little over time, but happy to field any questions.
I feel like this typically happens with romantasy things, whether it's my book club or things like this. Like people just like start talking about it, and like yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I could talk about romantasy for hours. Like I feel like that's just something. It's just the name of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get carried away.
We
And
absolutely do.
it is not a bad thing. Know that you can reach out to us after if you want to ask Rachel more about the book club, programming at her library, things that she's doing for Readers Advisory. Know that you can reach out to Rachel. if you want to reach out to me, you can always reach out as well with any recommendations. Hope is sharing, what patron age range do you see for your Romantasy book club?
It is actually all over. So we have some who are in like their earlier 20s, and we also have some that are as old as in their 70s. And surprisingly, my member who is, or actually, I have two members in their 70s, but one of them is actually her favorite thing is that the bigger the spice, the better. We read a book that was when we said that, oh well, this one isn't going to be so spicy, and she was like, oh man, I don't know if I want to come. I mean, obviously she was joking, but she was very surprised, and she surprised all of us that like she loved Butcher and Blackbird. Like she is wanting to read like the spicier the better. So I absolutely love it.
Just seeing here if there's any questions that have come in through the chat here. All right.
We have someone saying they sent in a question when they registered,
Yeah, with
and if they looked at the
YA
questions or if they should
appropriate. Yeah,
retype
I
it.
just checked the registration and it was a question about YA appropriate recommendations.
Okay.
One thing that I'm going to add to the chat is because I forgot to share it beforehand, but here's the link to these slides and the
Excellent.
handout. I'm going to share my screen one last time and show y'all. In this handout, we've listed out all of the titles that we've mentioned today, but I'll also add in some more because there's only so much that we could fit into an hour and 15 minutes. But I can include some more YA recommendations. I'll also include titles and authors that were mentioned in the chat, as well as attaching the chat for folks to explore. But if you want to get into some more recommendations, we can certainly add some more here. So I'll add in some more YA and tween recommendations for you all. Um, but with that, we are going to wrap up. We'll let you all get back to your Tuesday. And I'm so glad people enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to Rachel for being such a fantastic host. This was so fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to co-host this with you. Like we said, we could go on about Romantasy forever. So thank you
Mhm.
for everybody for listening to us kind of travel on because I think we could kind of I could go on and on. So thank you all so
Yeah.
much for listening. And this was my first webinar. So thank you all for bearing with me as I learn as I go along. So thank you guys so much.
Great. Thanks.